And the recording will be posted on the website. We have a project website, which I'll show a link to at the end of the presentation. And we will also share the slides from the presentation as well. So before I pass the baton over Supervisor Faust for a few remarks and to Providence District Staff Aide REA Calendar, I do want to go over some meeting logistics. Of course, we are operating over Teams. A lot of our past meetings have been over WebEx, but the platform works pretty similarly. There is a hand raise feature, which we'll be able to use at the end of the presentation to ask questions. If you're dialing in from the phone, you can hit *5 to raise your hand and then *6 to unmute yourself when we call on you. And then, of course, if you're using the app or using the web to access Teams, you can use the little hand icon to raise your hand. We've also enabled chat. So if you want to enter your questions in the chat at the conclusion of the presentation, please feel free to do that, and we'll take questions from callers, and from the chat we'll alternate on that. I did also want to mention that this is one session of two. We're going to have another information meeting on Saturday from 9:30 a.m. to 11 a.m. So with that, with the logistics out of the way, I'd like to turn the floor over to Supervisor Faust to give some opening remarks.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, everyone, for attending this West Falls Church Active Transportation Study community meeting. This study was initiated by Supervisor Palchik and myself, the Providence District Supervisor, to identify opportunities to improve pedestrian and bicycle access and safety between the West Falls Church Metro Station and surrounding communities. We're also looking, as many of you probably already know, at access to the two schools that are physically located in our study area. We've said all along this is a community-driven process, and your input's critical, and we really mean that. Tonight's presentation is going to include an overview of the study, the timeline, the details on how you can provide your input. I suspect that personally, having done a lot of this over the past 15 years, a lot of these pedestrian related projects, I think it's going to be fairly easy for us to identify what needs to be done, because it's pretty obvious. A lot of this pedestrian and bicycle access and safety improvements. The challenge will probably be in prioritizing those improvements. We're going to ask you to look at the benefits and the costs and various, I guess you would say the difficulty in obtaining private property rights sometimes. There's just so many different aspects that go into superimposing a pedestrian bike network on a totally built out community. And we can do it, and we will do as much as we possibly can, but it's a challenge. And those of you who worked with us on the prioritization over at the numerous projects we built on Kirby Road, you know what I'm talking about. It can get pretty heavy, some of the challenges we have to look into. But the bottom line is, this is so important, and it's the essence of creating community to have this type of facility, in my opinion. And so we'll make whatever effort is required to get this right. The county staff is working with, for those of you who aren't on the advisory group, there's a relatively small group of residents who are serving on our advisory group, and they're going to really get into the details with us. And we'll come back as appropriate to the community at large. But the advisory group's made up of people that and individuals who are either selected by Supervisor Palchik and myself, or we asked organizations like the PTAs and McLean Citizen Association and others to select some people for the group. It's a very impressive group of people. You'll be able to, the public will be invited to their meetings as we go through the year. Hopefully it won't take a full year, but it'll be on a monthly basis. We'll have the meetings. The representatives include Drainsville at-large reps, Providence at-large reps, a couple people from the PTAs, which I'm really excited about their participation, MCA, the Providence District Council, the Fairfax Alliance for Better Bicycling, and Fairfax Families for Safer Streets. So it is a great group, and they're going to do good work. I know they will. So I'm pleased to see that several advisory group members are, or at least I've been told that several advisory group members will be attending this evening. That's wonderful. Thank you for your service. I want to point out that Tom Bishadny is here. He is the head of the Fairfax County Department of Transportation, and he has a tremendous team. Many of them are here tonight. So I'm going to turn it over to Arya Callender, who is on the staff of Providence District Supervisor Palchik. And Arya will present a few comments, and I'm sure one of those will be to explain why Supervisor Palchik is not with us this evening.
You nailed it, Supervisor Faust. Much appreciated. And thank you. And I really just want to echo everything that Supervisor Faust has said. Very, very excited about this opportunity. Really looking forward about the many people who have had a chance to be able to give their thoughts from our community, the many organizations that are participating, and these incredible opportunities for the public to be able to comment as well and make sure that we get everyone's thoughts and feelings out there and make it so that the advisory group has as much information as possible, and really appreciate the work of county staff, of our partner organizations in making this happen, and most of all the residents of Providence, Drainsville, and all others who are involved in this in any capacity. Really, I just wanted to share a few words on behalf of Supervisor Palchik. She's sad she's not able to be here. Thankfully, it's for a very good reason. She recently has become a mother. She has a wonderful new baby named Sivan, and so she is still on maternity leave at the moment, and will be for a little bit longer. However, she did want to pass along how excited she is about this initiative, this opportunity to continue to learn from our community members about the different things that we want to look for and continue to continue to engage in terms of these connections all around this area. And she is looking forward to continuing to help drive these things forward as soon as she gets back, and really does appreciate the immense amount of hard work and effort and time that so many have put into this. Supervisor Palchik is deeply passionate about connecting these links and creating a multimodal and successful transportation opportunity, focusing on our pedestrian connections as we move forward. And so just really, really glad to be here and be a part of this incredible initiative. So thank you, Supervisor Faust. Thank you, staff. And we'll kick it over to y'all to kick us off.
Okay, thank you both. So we'll be pulling up the slides now, and first things first, we'll go over the agenda and then get right into what the study is and how we're looking to complete it. Okay, so again, this is the West Falls Church Active Transportation Study. And just to define active transportation, not just bicycles and pedestrians, but also people who get around in a wheelchair, runners, hikers, folks that might be using electric scooters, electric bikes, essentially any self-propelled, mostly human-powered travel. That's kind of the all-encompassing term, is active transportation. So we can go to the next slide and see what we're going to talk about during this meeting. So first thing we'll do is take a look at the background, how we got here, what the purpose of the study is, and then look at the study area. We have a couple maps to show you. Talk about, as Supervisor Faust mentioned, the advisory group that's working on the study, as well as the technical group that's providing support to the advisory group. Look at the study objectives, what we're hoping to achieve, and how we're hoping to achieve it through the existing conditions analysis and then a future analysis looking beyond when some of the nearby development comes online in several years, how that's going to impact traffic, and therefore how that traffic might impact what facilities we might recommend and what treatments we might recommend for active transportation users. We'll tie that into the active Fairfax transportation plan. I'll give a brief overview of what that is. It's the county-wide transportation plan that's really looking to synchronize, consolidate the county-wide trails plan and the county-wide bicycle master plan, and update some of the guidance therein and some of the policy. So I'll talk about the coordination there, and finally wrap it up with an overview of the timeline. When we're looking to accomplish some of these milestones and wrap up the study, as well as get into some Q&A. So any questions you might have on the study itself, or any feedback you want to provide on potential recommendations or areas that you would like us to focus on as we continue to work on this study. So we can go to the next slide, please. So a bit of background. Many of you probably heard about the plan amendment that was approved or adopted by the Board of Supervisors last July. This plan amendment was authorized by the Board of Supervisors in 2018 to look at what you see on the map there as subunit A1 and subunit A2 within the West Falls Church Transit Development Area. And the Transit Development Area is then part of the larger transit station area that kind of goes off the map here. But what the board asked staff to do was to look at how we might update the comprehensive plan, which is the larger long-range planning document for the county, and allowing for some mix of uses at both of these subunits. So subunit A1 is the WMATA property, currently serves WMATA parking, kiss and ride, bus circulation, and then subunit A2 is a Virginia Tech property, which has the Virginia Tech Northern Virginia campus. So the mix of uses would allow for some office, residential, retail in subunit A1, and some institutional office and retail in subunit A2. And so a big component of this comprehensive plan was, as Supervisor Faust mentioned, a focus on connectivity and access for pedestrians and bicyclists. So that was a theme that ran throughout the process. And you can see that in a lot of the recommendations that came out of the plan amendment. For example, recommending pedestrian scale lighting, recommending wider walk paths for pedestrians to increase comfort, and better connectivity for bicyclists, including some bike lanes within the site, trying to minimize crossing distances across some of the major roads, as you see Haycock Road running to the south of the site, and some considerations for how to connect the neighborhoods outside of the TDA into the Metro Center. So with that, we have a follow-on motion, which is what this study is aiming to achieve, and that's to look at active transportation from the surrounding communities and neighborhoods, from the W&OD Trail, the major regional trail, the Washington and Old Dominion Trail to the south, and some of the other neighborhood assets, trying to increase connectivity and provide for a more comfortable environment for active transportation users. So we can go on to the next slide, and this gives a bit more background on some of the development that's being considered. And these are concepts. The bottom you can see is the City of Falls Church property. There's a faint red outline there, but that is what the City of Falls Church has been working on, which they're calling their West Falls Development Project. They relocated the high school, which was George Mason High School, and you can see the new building over there, which is now Meridian High School, which opened up in October of last year. And then with the development itself, again, looking at an increased density and mix of uses. With the WMATA parcel, again, I mentioned what they're planning there, but the big benefit of these developments in terms of active transportation is that parallel roadway to Haycock. As you can see, Haycock is sort of outlined in black there, and then the parallel roadway is that green stretch that runs about from Chestnut Street on the other side of Leesburg Pike, all the way north via the Metro Access Road to Haycock Road, and also connecting up to the Metro Station entrance. So that's going to be a key feature of this development, is allowing for better connectivity for bicycles, for pedestrians, active transportation users, establishing a traffic signal where I said the intersection of Leesburg Pike and Chestnut Street is, to allow people to safely cross at a controlled intersection that's might not be as busy as Leesburg Pike and Haycock Road is. And so I think that's going to be a really key feature of the development, and something that we're trying to look at from the outside perspective, connecting into with this study. All right, you can go to the next slide. So I mentioned the countywide trails plan and the bicycle master plan. Those are shown on the left and right respectively. These were adopted in October 2014, but they really do show a strong long-range vision for this area, even though they're a bit dated at this time. And as I mentioned, Active Fairfax is looking to consolidate these plans and provide updated guidance on them. But you can see, the red lines on the left with the countywide trails plan. There's an extensive network already sort of envisioned for this West Falls Church area and extending beyond. Same with the bicycle master plan. And it's not just these plans that we're referring to. When looking at this study, Supervisor Faust mentioned a few of them, but some of you may have been involved in the VDOT Shreve Road Corridor Study, for example, the Westmoreland Street Corridor Study that was done maybe a couple of years ago. A lot of plans have been, already put into place, and some ideas considered, as well as what the City of Falls Church is considering. And this is, right up against the boundary line and overlapping it. So we really need to consider what they're planning as well, to make sure that whatever recommendations come out of this study tie in to what they're thinking of doing, and we can complement each other. So we've looked at their West End small area plan, for example, some improvements that they've been looking at on Shreve Road, and of course the West Falls Development Project. We can go to the next slide. So here's a map of the study area itself. And I do realize this is probably a bit hard for you to see if you're just looking on a laptop, but you can look at a bigger blow-up image of this if you go to the link at the bottom when we share these slides with you all. But I wanted to show the whole study area here and point out a few key features. The first is, of course, the center, which is the Metro Station entrance. And from there, you can see a green outline in a shaded area. So that's what's called the effective walkshed. Essentially, anywhere that you could walk within a mile from the Metro Station entrance. So that's following the roadways and the sidewalks to get to where you need to go. Looking at that versus looking at the first circle that you see, which is, as the crow flies, a mile radius from the Metro Center. You can see that there's a lot of barriers, namely the Metro's rail yard to the northwest of the station. You have obviously Route 7, which can present a barrier itself, without signalized crossings for people to safely get across that roadway. I-66, of course, running east-west throughout the middle, and then I-495 on the left, as you approach the 2-mile radius mark, and then the toll road coming down the center there. So as Supervisor Faust mentioned, a lot of challenges within this area. Not that we can't meet some of those challenges and recommend improvements to implement, but there are a lot of challenges that we are going to need to deal with as part of this. Another feature I wanted to mention is the sidewalk feature, which you can see outlined in yellow. You notice there's a lot of sidewalk around kind of the northern portion and within that 2-mile radius approaching Tyson's, but immediately adjacent to the station, you notice some gaps, so some missing sidewalks. And so one of the focus areas of this study is to be able to look at those gaps and see where we might want to make recommendations for connecting them. And so part of that gap analysis, as we call it, is looking at, again, creating that network for pedestrians within the 1 mile radius, then looking beyond at the 2 mile radius to see how the network operates for cyclists and where we can recommend improvements there. A couple other features I wanted to point out on this map. You can see a few blue dots scattered around the map. If you go to the website and you take a closer look at this, we have identified projects that are either planned, currently in the works, or have been recently completed within the last few years. So just to show that there are plans in the works. This is obviously not something we're starting from ground zero on. And there have been actually a lot of recently completed projects that are, promoting bicycle and pedestrian activity. So just to show, we are making some progress here. It might be, not as quick as some folks would like, and understand that, but we're looking at trying to work with these constraints. Again, some of the older neighborhoods that didn't have this infrastructure put in place, the sidewalks and such, it is difficult to retrofit. So just understanding those constraints is an important part of the study. So we can go to the next slide. And so to deal with these challenges, the biggest element of this is obviously you all, the community, and getting your feedback. And as representatives of the community, we have the advisory group, and Supervisor Faust mentioned, some of the different representatives of this group and the work they've done. We've met with them twice already. We've had 2 formal meetings. The kickoff meeting we had with them was on December 13th to just introduce the project as we are now, get them acquainted with what they're tasked with doing and their role in this study. And then we met again with them on January 24th to kind of gauge what they want us to focus on. And a lot of what we heard was connectivity to the schools, making sure that students have safe routes to schools. That's a big piece. And then just making repairs to the infrastructure that's existing and filling in the gaps, as I mentioned. So this group's been hard at work. Hopefully many of you who are here today have heard from them as they encourage you to participate and attend these meetings. But they've been doing great work so far. To support that group, we have the technical group, and this is made up of some subject matter experts from Fairfax County Department of Transportation, obviously being one, VDOT, seeing as they own the right of way that we're looking to make a lot of these recommendations within. Fairfax County Public Schools is going to be critical. They've already offered to collect data on walkers to the schools, which is going to be really helpful in determining the best routes for them. So those folks are really going to be critical in, when we come to them with the recommendations, kind of letting us know where the constraints are and maybe coming up with some alternatives or some better solutions and fine tuning those recommendations for us. Okay, we can move on to the next slide. So what are the objectives of the study? The biggest one, as I said, is getting community input. This study is not going to be successful without community input and ensuring transparency throughout. So making sure that you all are aware of what we're doing, how we're doing it, getting you involved is the most critical piece of this. And then ultimately improving safety, accessibility, and comfort for all active transportation users. As Supervisor Faust mentioned, it's a big area. There's already a lot of issues and recommendations that we've thought of and that people are going to put forward. So a really big element of this is going to be prioritizing those. We have some tools that can help do that. And we're going to involve the community a lot more in that with community surveys to try to set those priorities and get some of these recommendations to a stage where they can be implemented, funded, and implemented. As I mentioned already, coordination with the countywide Active Fairfax plan is a key piece of this, and I'll go into a little bit more of that later. And preparing some general cost estimates, having a plan to fund and implement some of these recommendations is obviously important. We don't want to just do a study, do a plan, and then let it sit there and collect dust. We want some action out of this, obviously. So, getting some data together and seeing a path forward is going to be really the final piece to this. And then I mentioned the rezoning process with the WMATA site. That will be in the works soon. So another part of this will be to inform that rezoning process. So as the WMATA development goes through rezoning, we want to make sure that we have these recommendations set and can speak to what we want to see in the area. And I'm very confident that we can get this study wrapped up by the time that rezoning process is complete. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Okay, so these are just some site images we've taken. These are probably from last year, but just to give an example of what we've seen as we've walked around the neighborhoods and the trails surrounding the West Falls Church Metro Station. So some of the recommendations that are going to come out of the study, if you look at the image on the left, would be to have trails that connect to something, that don't just end into a forest, or don't just dead end somewhere where people are going to have to walk into the road. So they're that way for a reason. We understand that. We understand that there's constraints, of course, in connecting some of these trails, but where can we try to prioritize those connections, and then looking at where we might be able to do some maintenance as things fall into some disrepair at times, especially as you can see along Haycock Road here, crossing over the I-66 bridge, approaching Turner Avenue. Definitely some maintenance considerations to be had there. And then as you look at the third image of Leesburg Pike, this is by Dale Drive, and you're looking towards the interchange with I-66. Traveling along this stretch where I took the photo is fairly comfortable. There's a wide sidewalk. There's a pretty wide buffer with that grassy area there. But then where do you go from there? If you want to go over to Pimmit Hills, obviously you can't access it from this side of Route 7. And then if you go to the north side of Route 7, you have to cross 2 entrance ramps onto I-66 and an exit ramp up I-66. So not the most comfortable walking conditions. So how do you improve that for folks coming from those neighborhoods that want to access Metro? So a couple key considerations, just some examples of what we've seen. Go to the next slide, please. So how are we going to be approaching this study? How are we looking at these facilities and recommendations? One way we've started to look at this is through what's called pedestrian level of comfort. And pedestrian level of comfort is a tool that was developed for Montgomery County back in 2019, and they've been using extensively as part of their pedestrian master plan, which I believe they're hoping to get approved by the end of this year. But they've mapped out their entire county with this tool, and essentially what it does is it takes different characteristics or attributes of the roadway and the sidewalk or pathway, combines those together to provide a comfort score. And so you can see what that looks like sort of on the bottom right. And we're looking at Shreve Road, looking towards Route 7. So some of the attributes that are included in this would be the pathway width. How wide is the area you're walking on? If it's narrow, 4 feet or shorter, or not that wide, if you're walking with a stroller and you're passing somebody, somebody's going to have to yield. Somebody's going to have to go around and maybe even enter the roadway. And so who's going to do that? You would hope that you can accommodate as many people as possible, especially around a transit station area. So we need to focus on some of these areas that don't have very wide walkways and even a wide buffer. So you can see that the grassy strip there is about 2 feet wide, not providing much space between vehicles traveling down the roadway and the pedestrian walking down the street. Speed obviously plays a factor, so the posted speed limit of a road, obviously the higher the speed, the less comfortable it would be. And then the parking lane, street trees, those two are elements that provide that additional buffer. Street trees would also provide shade in the summer, so added benefit there. And the parking lane, that would be a striped out parking lane, would provide at least 7 feet of additional space between the traveler on the sidewalk and traffic. So again, all those combined to a comfort score. This section that we're looking at here would rate very uncomfortable for those reasons I mentioned. And to get to a very comfortable, obviously you want to widen sidewalks, get to an area with lower speeds, widen the distance between you and traffic. Speaking of traffic, we would also be considering, as part of this metric, what's called average daily traffic, or ADT. And so VDOT has ADTs, average daily traffic counts, for most area roadways. And so we could look at 2019 pre-pandemic ADTs to see which streets have higher traffic. Obviously, higher traffic on higher speed roadways is going to yield a less comfortable environment. So those are the areas that we might want to focus some of our attention on. And then looking to the future, looking towards when some of these developments come online, all the way up to 2045, sort of projecting those average daily traffic numbers on a select number of streets within the 1 mile watershed of the study area can give us an idea of how we might need to plan to accommodate active transportation users in the future. Again, this is just a tool. It's not an official county tool. This is something we're trying out for the first time as the county does try to think more in terms of the pedestrian and bicyclist point of view versus vehicular. But really, the key considerations from the study are going to be your experiences. So we might show a facility that's comfortable or somewhat comfortable rated on this scale, but really we need to make sure we're matching that up with what you all are experiencing as you're walking down your street and walking to the metro. So we can go to the next slide, and this just shows something that the county has already looked at. This is bicycle level of traffic stress. So similar concept to what I just talked about with pedestrian level of comfort. And this is a map that we have a link to at the bottom there that the county already has. It shows basically the roadways that are most comfortable in green, and primarily you're going to see those in low stress residential streets with lower speed limits. So those are suitable for most people to ride on with comfort. And as you get down, obviously, to the red, use caution. Much less comfortable for cyclists to ride on those roads. You can see there, Shreve Road to Haycock, and then Route 7, of course, Great Falls Street, not as comfortable for cyclists to use. And so, looking at this map, you can see that it's sort of creating this barrier, these streets outlined in red for cyclists to access Metro. So how do we improve that? We'll have to consider that and think of some ways that we can accommodate not only pedestrians, but cyclists. Okay, we can go to the next slide. And I mentioned Active Fairfax. They've already done a lot of work. They've done a lot of outreach. They've done, a lot of really interesting things to kind of get the community involved and present information. And this is one thing that they've done is look at barriers to active transportation and some of the key destinations around Fairfax County. So this image in the middle is a snip from this barriers to access map, and the link is above. Essentially, what you can do is go to this map, leave a comment. So if you think there's a barrier to transit, you can select that as the category over on the right. You can enter your name if you want, you don't have to, and then enter your comment. So what what is presenting a barrier to transit access? Well, there's too many lanes I have to cross, or the sidewalk's too narrow, whatever it might be. Then you can add an attachment. So an image is always helpful to show what exactly you're speaking about, and click on the green button and report it. This has been a really helpful tool that Active Fairfax has created. There's already, for the county, as of about a week ago, 1,500 comments on the map, which is great. And then within our study area itself, there are 100 comments. So again, going back to the laundry list, we have already 100 different things potentially that we could be looking at. So the key to this is going to be prioritizing all these different things and seeing, one, are there some low hanging fruit? If we want to paint a striped crosswalk, or some of the things that are really going to provide the most bang for the buck, connect the most people to Metro. Those are the things that we're going to want to try to prioritize. Of course, Active Fairfax is doing much more than this. As I said, consolidating the trails plan, the bike master plan. They have a draft Safe Streets for All program that they did a lot of outreach on in November and are continuing to work on. So all that can be accessed from their website, which I'll have a link to at the end of this presentation if you want to learn more. We go on to the next slide, please. Okay, so starting to wrap up here, this is the study timeline. So I mentioned we had the kickoff meeting with the advisory group in December, and then we've started our existing conditions assessment. Really, we've been doing an existing conditions assessment for a while now as part of the plan amendment, kind of going out and seeing, where we can make improvements, and talking to folks at VDOT and others. But we're hoping to wrap up that existing conditions assessment in March. So we've, again, met with the technical group once, met with the advisory group twice. We're looking to finalize the study scope really by the end of this week. The draft is posted on the website for you to look at. And you can see the star there. That's where we are, obviously, in February, having our first set of public meetings. So again, by March, we're looking to finish up that existing conditions assessment and meet with both the advisory group and the technical group to discuss the recommendations, present that initial list to the community in April, likely the end of April, maybe leading into May, and refining those recommendations, developing priorities with your feedback. As I mentioned, we'll have a survey open to solicit more feedback, and then trying to finalize that list sometime in June. Again, that's not the end of this. Some of the important work is going to be done afterwards to secure funding, and look for priority projects that can be implemented quickly, and kind of chart a path going forward. Throughout all this, of course, the public can submit comments. My email address is going to be listed at the end of this. It's on the website as well. I encourage you all to talk to your advisory group members if you know who's representing you, but if not, reach out to me, of course. And we're going to have that survey prepared for you all to submit comments as well. Coordination with the advisory group and the technical group is going to be ongoing through this, of course. And one of the goals of this is going to be finalizing these recommendations prior to the rezoning of the WMATA site. So I did want to mention that as well. So last two slides coming up here. Again, this is kind of just a recap of what I already said, but our immediate next steps are to hold those meetings with the technical group and the advisory group, and then we'll speak with you all, the public again, and present those initial recommendations, likely in late April and early May, as we also release that community survey. That is the end of my presentation. The last slide here just gives some information. West Falls Church Active Transportation Study website, along with my email address. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions about the study, any comments, any feedback where you want us to focus on improving, making recommendations. And then, of course, I mentioned the Active Fairfax plan. They have a ton of information on their website, a lot of resources that are really interesting and worth checking out. And then you can email their team at the address below. So looking to take questions now. We have some hands raised. I believe I've seen some activity in the chat. So I'm going to turn it over to Mike Garcia to sort of facilitate that. But as you ask your questions, a couple things to maybe think about. You may want to know more about how we're studying these things, what exactly we're studying, ways to get involved. But we'd also like to hear from you, hear your feedback. If you walk to Metro, if you walk from the WNOD trail to some of these destinations, or from your neighborhoods, we like to hear about your experiences and some of the things that you think we should consider, what you think are some of the major barriers to access. So, not only questions about the study itself, but love to hear your feedback at this time as well. So with that, take it away.
Okay, so we're going to try to give this a good go here. So what I'm going to do is going to try to take the people off of who have their hand raised, and then we'll try to go back and forth between the chat. I understand we're going to try to be as even as we can on this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to elevate you. I'm going to allow you to unmute yourself. And then once you've asked your question and provided your comment, I'm going to go ahead and disable your mic again. So John Guest, you have your hand up and you're going to be the first one. So I'm going to allow your mic and you have to unmute yourself. And that's John with Jon. I don't see a last name. And if I don't get a response, I'm happy to, I'm going to disable your mic and then I will just come back to you if your hand stays raised. So I'll give it another moment. If not, John Guest with Jon. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and disable the mic and we'll move down and we'll come back if need be. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is Adrian White. You have your hand raised? Go ahead and unmute.
Hey there.
Hi.
Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Okay, that seems to have worked.
I am unmuted now.
Okay, it's a little
can you hear
slow on
me?
my end. Yes, so hold on. So we're going to take John first.
Okay, yeah, looks like we're working now. Thank you so much, everybody, for being on this call and informing us of projects happening in our neighborhoods, in our communities. And, it's great to see that we're all working on this stuff together. I had a quick question about looking at your map with the blue dot with the number 9. Is there a way to describe, or is there any plans that you already have in place that you're proposing with regards to Red Road on the Redfield side and the Pemmott Hill side?
Yes, so that is a project that's currently in the TPP and is being studied. So that would be to connect Red Road to the Pemmott Hill side via a bridge and improve the walkway to connect those two neighborhoods. So yeah, that is something that we are actively studying and looking a little closer at. Again, it's been on the TPP, I believe, for a number of years now, but that is something I know that our transportation design division has given some consideration to as well.
Okay, understood. Now, what does that entail when you say a bridge? Is that a bridge then that's a walking bridge, or is that a driving and a walking bridge?
No, this would only be a pedestrian bridge, so not for vehicular traffic.
I see. So, yeah, I mean, over the years, this has been we've lived there for 7 years. We understand that, some of the neighbors have lived there since, Kennedy was president. So we've seen that this has been on the docket a couple times. In your opinion, well, in your study, when you're saying that it's a walking bridge, is this is this a concrete bridge? Can you describe a little bit further what you're proposing?
Sure. So those design details are still being worked out, and we'll be happy to provide more information on these specific projects, again, as they start to be discussed in a little more detail. We've heard already from other folks on the advisory group, for example, about this connection. And so we know that it is an important one. So definitely something that we're taking a closer look at, and we'll be happy to provide more information as it becomes available on specifically how we're making that connection.
Okay, and does it entail anything that has to do with after because there's the creek there, Little Pemmon Run. Is there anything else that you're proposing that you're aware of with respect to walkways along the street, Red Road going up towards Idlewood?
Not that I'm aware of. I can take a look at reaching out to the project manager assigned to that and see if that's included in the scope. I'm not sure that it is, but again, we're here to listen to your recommendations. And so if folks think that that's a necessary connection and that including a sidewalk there, if it's not already, of course, included in the scope, is important, that's something that we can at least consider. With that being said, of course, in considering all these recommendations, we have to identify that there are constraints. So putting a sidewalk in a neighborhood involves the buy-in from everybody in that neighborhood where the sidewalk will be fronting their property. So just a consideration there.
Okay, and is it so all these things that are happening in the background, is there an understanding that we have as of right this minute that you guys are working on it at the moment? You don't have anything planned, and if we want to talk to people and voice our opinions, on the matter, who do we specifically reach out to? Do we reach out to you or do we reach out to the project managers?
Right. So you can reach out directly to me. Again, my email's on the back end of this presentation. But these are being actively looked at. These are plans that have been on, again, what's the Transportation Priority Plan. It's a list of priorities that the county is looking at. There are a number noted on this map. But with that being said, hearing from you all and then hearing from the advisory group on these specific projects, which ones you feel are priorities and are really critical for connecting to the metro station, of course. That's important. So if you have any thoughts on that, please feel free to send me an email on it. And again, I can get in contact with whoever is looking at this in greater detail and provide that feedback to them as well.
Okay.
Tim, this is Tom Bashadny. For any active project, when we get far enough along in the design, we are going to come out and have community meetings on those specific projects so that the community will be able to provide feedback. We need to get a certain level of design done though before we can come out and have a informed discussion with the community. So there will be community meetings coming up on the details of the individual projects.
That's good to know, because here's the reality of it. We, most of us were unaware of this until it's brought up, sometimes casually through friends and things like that, through word of mouth. So areas of our civic department, I guess we need to be on monitoring those emails a lot closer, based on the fact that we weren't really, a lot of us weren't really aware of any of this until recently. Recently, like as of like the last few days. So how can we be more informed as we go forward with the plans that you guys are putting together in the background?
Sure. So we're going to continue to do outreach for this study, but as Tom mentioned, for these specific projects, there's going to be separate outreach conducted as well. So anything, for Red Road example, your neighbors are going to be informed. Mailers might go out. There might be news releases to inform folks of what's happening in your neighborhood. And if you have questions on a specific project, again, if it's within the study area, happy to take your feedback and questions on that. And then we have the general DOT email as well for other projects. But again, the outreach is going to be ongoing for this study, certainly, and then for these specific projects, more targeted outreach, as Tom mentioned.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much. Want to move on to the next question?
Was I next, Adrian?
Yes, Adrian, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you for showing that MoCo slide. I found that interesting and useful. Having worked for the Federal Highway Administration, I believe, and I think I have good data to believe, that traffic volumes and active transportation safety and accessibility are inextricably linked. I'd like to know if you have predictive data, holistic data for the City of Falls Church, Virginia Tech, and WMATA sites.
Sure, absolutely. We do, as I didn't mention, but as part of the plan amendment for the WMATA and Virginia Tech sites, we did do a traffic impact study. That is actually something that we can share if you would like it, or if anybody in the community would like information on that, we can share that information. It's mentioned as one of the resources in our scope of work. But in addition to that, as I mentioned, we are going to be looking at the average daily traffic volumes pre-pandemic, and then comparing those to forecasted volumes in 2045 for select roadways. So certainly looking at some of the major roadways like Route 7, Haycock Road, Great Falls, Westmoreland Street, and even some of the residential neighborhoods to, as you said, look at the relationship between an increase in traffic given the development in the area and how that might affect the recommendations that come out of the study.
Thanks, Tim. I've read
Sure.
the TIA for the comp plan amendment. What I haven't seen, and maybe you have it and I just haven't seen it, are the predictive data for the area 2045, as you just mentioned. And I would be interested, particularly with respect to the rezoning on WMATA, in predictive data that's holistic, not just attributable to the WMATA site.
So this is Mike. So yes, that's true. When the zoning case comes in, then that data will be available as well. And then we are looking predictive wise, trying to see what facilities are needed. That's why Tim had mentioned that before, that we will have some forecasted volumes, some of the daily forecasted volumes for some of the roads in the area to make sure that we can make sure that the facility recommendations that are maybe appropriate now are still appropriate for future conditions.
Thanks, Mike. I have read the VDOT data online. By the way, it's readily accessible if anybody wants to go look it up. The 2019 data are probably reasonable with respect to some of the roads in the area under study, but I'm not quite sure that they are as predictive as I'd like to see.
Okay, well, we have our models and we'll be able to kind of share that information when we have it available. So thank you very much. Okay.
Thanks.
All right, we're going to move down the list. Arian Suzu, I'm sorry, I'm going to mess your name up, but I'm going to enable your mic. And then you should see that you can now unmute yourself. Yes.
I say thank you. Yeah, my name is Doug Jeffrey. Arian's my wife who dialed in.
Okay, sorry.
No problem. Thank you all to the committee for setting this up and having this seminar. The data that you all provided and the maps specifically were very detailed, and it's very much appreciated. So thank you. So like I was saying, I live on Berkeley Street, just around the bend from the West Falls Church. And one area in particular that I wanted to draw your all's attention to is Turner Ave. runs between Haycock Road and Grayson Place. And it's one of two entry points into our neighborhood. And it's pretty heavily trafficked, particularly by commuters on foot. Currently, there's no sidewalks there at this point. People are either forced to walk in people's lawn or just stand in the street. And particularly at the end there, as you actually approach Grayson Place, it comes to a choke point between trees. It's very dangerous. I think it'd be worth potentially adding sidewalks and streetlights. And again, it's very dark at night there, and I think that would fit naturally very nice into the sidewalks that you all already have for Haycock Road, as well as the townhouses there in Williamsburg Ponds. They have sidewalks, so I think it would fit very nicely in there. And the Haycock Road in particular, where it meets Turner Ave, is at the base of two hills. So people tend to get a lot of speed as they come into that turn. So having people on the street there is kind of a recipe for disaster. And then our neighborhood as a whole doesn't have sidewalks, and I don't think we really need it, even though having it in that entry point would be really beneficial because the streets are very wide, they're very well lit. It's really just the entry point that is potentially an issue. And something that I also wanted to bring up, which on its face might not seem related, but I think very much is we have very frequent power outages in our neighborhood there. And I think it's a symptom of how our neighborhood is kind of in the nook between 66 and 267. And really, it causes the power lines to have to be like a winding snake into our neighborhood, whereas a normal neighborhood would just have a bunch of, be part of a larger network and have a lot of redundancies. So I think if you all were to add a redundant line into our neighborhood in terms of power off Turner Ave, whereas right now we just have the one coming in Hutchins, that would add a huge benefit to the neighborhood, but it would also create a lot of backlight for drivers to see pedestrians. And also, obviously, you all having streetlights is a big important part of it. If you have frequent power outages, you're not going to be able to see the streetlights. So I think that would be something that would also benefit, drivers, pedestrians, bicyclists, and the like as they move around off those major roads. So that was my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jeffrey.
Thank you very much.
Okay, disable. Next up, Mr. Paul Rothstein, let me enable your microphone. Okay, you should go ahead and you should have permission now to unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I served on the terminated West Falls Church Task Force, and I've been observing the active transportation group study process, and I've gathered dozens of documents in tinyurl.com/Faust Paulchik McKay, and that's one word. I've placed the link in chat so people can read the documents for themselves. These documents memorialize community warnings and bureaucratic indifference and gaslighting. And I invite people who want to add their thoughts in pictures and videos to let me know. Go to TikTok and Instagram and Twitter and document the fact that you know what's going on here and send it to me to westfallschurchsafety@gmail.com. I'll post the links. We can use social media to bring out the truth. The West Falls Church area belongs to people who live here and not to outsiders who will endanger children walking to Haycock Elementary School and other pedestrians and bicyclists to further their own agenda. Fairfax County has imposed repeated roadblocks to disguise the basic truth. The West Falls Church metro area has a suburban infrastructure that is greatly deficient in sidewalks and other necessary features, but Fairfax County is going to impose on the area an urban level of traffic without guaranteeing a full solution to the problem. And while Fairfax County elected officials and bureaucrats repeat catchphrases like transit-oriented development and multimodal, Fairfax County is going to extract an urban level of tax revenues far in excess of the amounts that will be allocated to the area from the countywide infrastructure fund. At the same time, Fairfax County will dump costs on the people of West Falls Church metro area in the form of avoidable accidents and deaths. When those accidents and deaths happen, people will ask, why did no one act when they could have? And at that point, you can go to tinyurl.com/Faust Paulchik McKay and see exactly how it happened and the contents of that file will confirm that the names of that file were the people most responsible. I'll conclude with the conclusion of my remarks to the board on July 13th. The board needs to ensure that pedestrian problems are solved in the wider area before permitting construction. The Fairfax County Board of Supervisors can still come to a reasonable solution that promotes development, guarantees stability of existing neighborhoods, and solves decades of problems. All it takes is some common sense and political will. I hope at this late date that you will do the right thing. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, next up, Dave Krantz. I'm gonna allow you to unmute yourself, and when you're ready, go ahead.
Thanks. I just had one question looking at the map, going back to the blue dots like a couple other people. First, I want to thank I live on the Pimmitt side of Pimmitt Run over in Pimmitt Hills. I do want to thank our neighbors over in Red Road there. I did not even notice that bridge. It's interesting they're going to connect our two communities like that. So I appreciate those comments. I'm actually looking at it from VFW perspective on the Chaplain River VFW post, which is right under the blue dot 26. And what was confusing me there is it appears that you're saying that's a Falls Church City project, and I just want to make sure maybe the dot's in the wrong place or I'm misunderstanding. Looking at the map, it is rather small because I believe we are Fairfax County on that side of Shreve, if I'm looking at it right. I just wanted to ask that question so I can understand what 26 was and who to direct questions to on that aspect of it.
Sure. So that actually is a project that the City of Falls Church is working on. It's kind of skirting the boundary of the City of Falls Church and Fairfax County, that side of Shreve Road. And what that is looking at is connectivity from the W&OD Trail along the south side of Shreve Road up to Route 7, or their side being Broad Street. So that's something that they.
On their side of Shreve, is that what we're saying with it?
Yeah. So some of the project does actually fall within the county, and so they would be coordinating with us on that. We've gotten some information from the project manager on that project, which I believe will be going into the design phase this spring, actually. But they are working with NBTA funded grant for this project, and so they're looking at just increasing multimodal connectivity from the trail, as I said, and it does sort of cross the line. So it's something that they applied for, this grant. It does serve their city as well, but is something that they can obviously will coordinate with us, being Fairfax County on. Like I said, Falls Church, we do have a Falls Church representative on the technical group that's a part of this study. So we'll have more information on that.
So Tim, to save time for others, I could maybe just shoot you an email to that address and you could kind of give me some definition on the project on who to kind of ask what it is. I don't want to take up our time. I just want to kind of know what's going on in front of us.
Certainly. Yes, and the city, sure, and the city does have a scope for that project as well. Their application to NVTA, so I could share that with you if you wanted information, and then of course as more progress is made on that project, we can share that with the group as well.
Well, that's great. I'll shoot you a separate email. Let's continue on with it. Thanks for answering that question.
Thank you, Mr. Krantz. Okay. Next up is Cheryl Sim. I'm going to enable your mic and you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you very much, Mike, and thank you very much, Tim. I am a member of the advisory group, so I have been privy to more presentations than the community members tonight. And I think this was a very good presentation. It would have been an excellent presentation had you included the average daily traffic totals. And I really think you're doing a bit of a disservice by not sharing that with the group. I mean, for example, we know that in 2019, the average daily traffic total between Route 7 and Great Falls on Haycock Road is about 12,000 trips per day. From Great Falls to Westmoreland, I believe it's 6,400 trips a day. I don't have the figures in front of me, but I really think it would be good if you could pull up that slide and also to let people know how much traffic is going to be generated from this new development. I think Adrian White hit on this, and I think the TIA estimates are 8,100 additional trips per day. So I think that's important for the community to understand what level of traffic we're going to be facing. The second thing I want to say is, at our last advisory group meeting, I raised some issues related to the West Falls Church station itself, particularly concerns about kiss and ride, what's going to happen to the kiss and ride. And a new concern has popped up as I've chatted with members of the community this past week, and that is what is going to happen to those of us who walk to the metro when the construction starts. How are walkers going to be protected from the construction materials and the big trucks, et cetera, et cetera? So if someone could address that, I think that would be greatly appreciated. And
Sure.
finally, I hope at some point that we have this technical advisory group. I hope that the actual advisory group will have an opportunity to ask questions of the technical advisory group members themselves. Thank you.
Okay,
Sure.
and
So,
Tim, let me go ahead and address the walkability one real quick during construction. So during construction, just as there is in any sort of construction, there's always called a maintenance of traffic plan. And that actually dictates how you're going to keep roads open during construction, as you see kind of going on I-66 now. And we also have the same thing as when it comes to pedestrian walkways and bicycle facilities as well. We must have a safe walking path always open during construction. So if that entails maybe going into the road a little bit in order to create that path, making sure that people can cross at a safe location to cross at the other side, or if there need be potentially put overhangs, as you see in the cities, to make sure there's no construction debris that could fall. So any and all that is always taken into consideration, and we make sure that there is a safe way for people walking from the neighborhood to get to the metro station.
okay, thank you, Mike. Yeah, so to address the point on the ADTs, we do have that presentation posted online, so you can go to the link there. If you did want to see that, we have a list of some of the ADTs. We've broken the 1 mile radius of the map into quadrants and have a list of some of those roadways and their respective ADTs within that presentation. So if you go to the website, you can pull up a presentation from advisory group meeting number 2 and take a look at that if you're interested. As far as the interaction between the technical group and the advisory group, we've tried to keep that separate for a reason, so that the advisory group can do the work that they need to do and focus on, having the discussions you need to have, while the technical group is more of, talking through the recommendations that you all propose. But if we see a need for having more interaction between those groups, FCDOT, myself and others have been sort of the liaison, the go-between, but certainly I know some of those folks on the technical group wouldn't mind joining one of the advisory group meetings and providing more information if that's what's requested. So we can definitely discuss that.
Well, Jim, just let me say thank you for that, because in the letter of invitation that all of us received when we joined the group, it says there will be a citizen advisory group supported by a technical group. And in your own scope of work, it says a technical group will also be established to provide technical expertise and support to the advisory group. And we do have questions. We have questions for VDOT. We have questions for WMATA. We have questions for Fairfax County Police. And I know that in the next community meeting, some of these issues are going to come up. So I think it would be incumbent upon us to have a wide group of experts at some of these meetings. And now I'm going to mute myself. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sim. Okay, the next person up, Nancy McFalls. Let me allow you to unmute yourself. Okay, you should be able to mute yourself now.
Okay, great. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so first of all, thank you guys for the task force. This is so many years in the making, so many letters, so many community people reaching out. I really appreciate it. Couple things I just want to make sure they get on the list for evaluation. Controlling the traffic leaving the metro area. when you go over the 66 bridge, you're going from a commercial area to a only residential area. There's only residences and like a church and a baseball field and whatnot, schools. So if we could have some really visual cues to any driver to show. And perhaps because the bridge is so wide, and someone mentioned the choke point right at Turner Avenue, maybe use the bridge to put a big island in the middle, with signage and whatever, just something to really let people know you're leaving the area where you really should be unless you live here. The second thing, that Great Falls and Haycock Light has been a dangerous area. I know people have complained over the years. They've almost been hit many, many times because I'm not sure if it's changed, but it used to be that you can turn on red and there's no dedicated walking signal. So that's an area that, as more and more traffic, like Cheryl mentioned some numbers that indicate a lot of people will be turning at that light because there's a certain number of thousands of drivers today reaching that light, and then a much lower number that continues on to Haycock. So we know that turning is an issue. And then a couple other things, additional crosswalks, Casemont and Haycock. At that, we've been begging for years. Students have to walk on some really inappropriate roads or backtrack to walk behind the neighborhood to get onto a sidewalk to then circle back to get to school. It's really awkward and unsafe. Westmoreland east of Haycock has really nothing, no way to cross until you get into Arlington. So that's another area. It's a big road. It's very hard to get across. You guys have done a great job prioritizing areas like in front of Longfellow. If we could have a little love closer to Arlington, that would keep people safe, especially as Roosevelt and Rochester. There's a hill there with a really blind area that I'm surprised there haven't been more accidents. And then the last crosswalk area that I think is really ripe is Hutchison and Great Falls. I know over the years, different people have lobbied for that and unsuccessfully. A bonus, if you put a crosswalk in there, we would save on busing. Our taxpayer dollars are going to bus kids that are within a mile from school. So those are the big things I think that are really appropriate to getting people safely to the metro. And then two other things, Westmoreland drivers, they go way too fast. You guys know that. When you're talking about the comfort level, if we could have anything to slow them down, if you could make it more of a boulevard with center island refuges and that sort of thing, that would be very appropriate for the area and would slow people down. And then the last thing, our streets are being used by commuters who are just cutting through. They want to get from Westmoreland to Great Falls to, into Falls Church. They want to avoid Route 7. So roads like Beacon and Moley and Fisher, they have cars whipping down them. That people don't live there. We don't have sidewalks. So we have, our kids are out in the street trying to walk to school. People are walking their dogs. It is really scary. So I was thinking maybe you guys could consider blocking some of those streets at a midpoint like you've done on Haycock. Haycock does not go all the way through to that hill. I don't remember what it's called, where the radio tower used to be. You guys did that sometime years and years ago. Arlington has done that a lot. And maybe consider something like parking on one side of the street and a dedicated walking lane on the other that's a little bit protected so you don't have to get people's permission to rip up their yards. So I know that was a lot of information. Again, thank you. I will mute myself, and I really appreciate the time.
Thank you, Ms. McFalls. We really appreciate it. Okay. Next up is Kathy Pippin. I'm going to allow you to unmute yourself, and you should be able to go ahead.
Hi there. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. I have a little speaker problem here, so bear with me. First of all, thank you so much. Thank you for the presentation, everyone. It's wonderful to have a lot of information here, and I wanted to echo some of the concerns or questions as Cheryl Sims and Nancy, who just spoke. Basically, I am in the same neighborhood. I am right in the Haycock, Casemont, walking distance to school, walking distance to Metro, right? So the issues that are really concerning for us over here is exactly what Nancy went over. But one of the huge concerns are the traffic that comes down Great Falls going toward the school. Again, a lot of these have been people who do not live in the community. They are zigzagging through our neighborhood. They go through Casemont, Beacon, Fisher, Molly to get out to further out to 66. So we all have kids. If you lived in this neighborhood, I swear you would probably, your heart would drop at least once a day. So we have asked and asked and asked several times, years, and we have been really faced with passing the bucket, but then also VDOT putting a stop to everything, coming up with excuses, that technical excuses. You know, as a neighbor, as a taxpayer, as somebody who uses the neighborhood and contributes to the neighborhood, that is not acceptable. And I appreciate that what this study group is doing. Thank you very much, but we need more. Like Cheryl said, we need a little bit more data. If you can bring on those technical guys, VDOT, and come up with some solution that they are not pushing and telling us that this cannot be done because of such and such. We understand that, but there's always solutions around things. So would like everyone to kind of hear the frustration. I'm sure you can hear the frustration in my voice and in my life because of the safety issues, not only for the kids, but for us walkers. So Haycock itself, one side of it has a sidewalk, the other side ends. So are there any plans for this wonderful community that is going to be built, that for these walkers, these metro walkers, people who are walking to the metro, can cross safely from Casemont onto Haycock and go on to Great Falls and go on straight to the metro? So that would be one question, an inquiry. Is there a solution for that, a crosswalk? Is there a traffic management set up on Haycock, not the Haycock that is closest to this development? It sounds like you all got that right for the most part. Maybe I don't live on that part, so I let other neighbors to speak to that. But the part that I live on, it's a daily reminder of how dangerous this area is. So is there any traffic calming? Is there any traffic management? Is there anything that can be put on Haycock that is leading to Haycock School? Would be awesome. There is also the other thing, because in particular Haycock coming down from Great Falls is a downhill, so a lot of people, of course, tend to speed coming down. VDOT has said to us, send your kids 10-15 minutes out in the cold, snow, rain, heat through Molly and Fisher so they can walk through Westmoreland because there is a school guard there. Oh, that's a fantastic solution. Why don't you send your kids 10-15 minutes extra over there? And they've also recommended, well, if you don't want to take that, well, send them through Beacon. Beacon is a shorter cut. Well, Beacon doesn't have any sidewalk. So these solutions are not realistic. And so that's what I have heard in the past, and that's what we've seen as a community. So we would really would like, one is that to give us data, bring on the data people and the technical folks, and then also tell us, are there any traffic management programs that you can set up on these neighboring streets, whether it's flashing lights. I love what Falls Church City has done in some of their streets. They do bumps, they do flashing lights, they do all sorts of things to slow people down. Why can't we have that? Especially with this amazing development that is going on. And I'm sure there's a lot of parties to that are making a lot of money.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Pippin. We
Okay.
appreciate the comments. We do have them, and we do have some information that we can post just
All
for
right. Thank you very much.
And for everyone's sake, we're going to post a map of the ADTs along with the reference materials that will be posted online too. I know there was people wanted to see that, so we'll grab the 2019 VDOT ADTs and show a map and make sure that all gets posted. All right, with that, I will move on, and we will move on to Allie Guest. Sorry, there's no last name. I'm going to enable your microphone. You can unmute yourself now.
Hi, yes. Sorry, this is Allie Nickler. I'm on the board of Pemmon Hills Citizens Association. I attended some of the original West Falls Church redevelopment meetings. I think it was 2 years ago. My 3-year-old was like a baby, so maybe 3 years ago. And I advocated at that time that while we loved the idea of more mixed development in close proximity to our neighborhood, that access was a huge, huge problem. So I'm very excited to see that Supervisor Faust's office and Fairfax County is taking those considerations seriously and has formed this group. I think in making your recommendations when that part comes in the coming months, I think it's important to be specific. Simply saying that we want connections or sidewalks is not detailed enough. For example, the south side of Pemmon Hills is routed or is boundary mapped to Lemon Road Elementary School. There is only one path, because they're all walkers, to get from Pemmon Hills to Lemon Road Elementary School that has at least about a flight worth of steps. So any child who lives further into Pemmon and rides a bike to school has to walk their bike down the flight of steps and then up the hill at Lemon Road, or any caregivers who might walk a child and bring a younger child in a stroller is faced with the same issue. So with that in mind, PHCA has previously spoken with Supervisor Faust about project number 9 that the first speaker spoke about at Red Road. We would advocate as strongly as humanly possible that that connection needs to be without steps. It needs to be something that can be that you can pass over in a bike or with a stroller. There's a slight grade change from one side to the other, but it is not nearly as significant as the rest of Pemmon Hills. And so I think that that is a key feature to making that project a benefit to the community. I would also say that about 5 slides from the back, you had a map about the bike routes and safety related to bike routes, which is outdated. It shows bike paths that do not exist. It implies that there is a path to get to the Metro rail yard from the north side of 66, which has been closed for at least 5 years. It also indicates that there is a path from Pemmon Road, I believe kind of near the corner by Oni Park, that would take you out to Great Falls Street. And I'm pretty sure that's not an actual path. It's basically a worn down path because people walk it, but I don't believe there's actually a path there. So I think it's really important to look at these maps and make sure that they're actually accurate. And I can check with some from our community who are more bikers and would know that for sure, but I'm pretty sure that, well, I know for sure there's no access into the Metro, and I believe there's no access to Great Falls Street. You have to go all the way up to McGarity. I'm disappointed that during the presentation, and maybe I misinterpreted the intent, but it sounded like the idea of providing connection from these sites to the north side over 66 is not on the table. Is that a fair assessment? I know it's a big ask, but is that really not an option?
Can I clarify? Are you talking about through the west, through the
I want
metro
to
yard?
get from the metro. I want to get from the metro to Idlewood Road somehow. That does not involve crossing entrance ramps to Route 66.
No, that's so to clarify, that's not off the table. And in fact, you're right, that's not an existing connection today. That is something that had been studied in the past and actually is on our comprehensive plan as a connection. Just want to note that it's a barrier today. There's no existing way to get over there now. But you're right, establishing that sort of connection would obviously be a great way for folks in Pimmet Hills to get over to the metro station.
So I would
Challenges, of course. Oh, go ahead.
advocate, I would say it's not just Pimmet Hills, it's also the apartments that are
Sure.
north of Trader Joe's. I think they're Peachtree. It would also be the apartments over behind Whole Foods and Taco Bamba. It could be the apartments over kind of catty corner Route 7 in Pimmet, because at least at those areas, there are sidewalks and crosswalks that people could get from those areas into Pimmet and then come through this Red Road bridge potentially or through Idlewood. But I think sidewalks are great, but if you can't provide a safe way to get from this site to the north side of 66 somehow, you're putting band-aids.
Sure. So no,
You're
that
not going to realize the full benefit of this project, and you're not going to be able to achieve your comprehensive plan of an urban area that's walkable, because you just cast half of it away as not an option.
right. So again, this is something that is in our comprehensive plan as a connection. Now, that being said, there are obvious challenges there. One being the security of Metro's rail yard. But of course, as I mentioned, WMATA is on our technical group. This is something that they're aware of. We can talk to them more about the feasibility. This, I think I mentioned, was studied a few years ago. So if it's something that we need to bring forward again and look at again more closely, we're certainly able to do that. And I do see your point about making that connection.
Okay, thank you, Ali.
Sorry,
Is there any concluding points that you want to make?
Sorry, I had one other question.
Yes,
Is the
please.
and I'm sorry, I missed the intro. I was having trouble getting on, but is the advisory committee for this the same as the group that was the West Falls Church Transit something? When was this advisory committee formed?
So the advisory group for this project was formed late last year, and the first meeting they had was December 13th. But is a separate group, not the same group. That was the task force for the plan amendment.
And how were people, I guess, solicited to be on the advisory board? Because I don't believe PHCA was asked to be part of this.
So the way that it was done is that we reached out to the supervisors' offices and had them select people from within the supervisory districts. And then we reached out to the PTAs, had the supervisors reach out to the individual PTAs for the schools that surrounded it, and had them to also put people on it as well. And we also requested that other advocates be added to it as well. So safe routes to schools, and then something from the Fairfax Advocates for Better Bicycling. So
okay, I guess I wish PHCA had been asked to be a part of this process.
okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, the next person is Karen K. I'm going to enable your mic. Please try to. Okay, you're good. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. I put some comments in the chat as well, but kind of recircling back to the Red Road bridge, and then also the surrounding areas, the surrounding neighborhood sidewalks. I just wanted to kind of underscore the combination need of both of those items together. Obviously, if there's going to be heavier pedestrian traffic with the Red Road Bridge, the neighborhood in the area, I feel like, would benefit from also having sidewalks, because even before the bridge, without sidewalks in the neighborhood, and the kids walking to school, it is a little bit cumbersome, just because the parents are always having to yell basically whenever there's a car coming, to all the kids. And there's probably about 3 or 4 parents that walk a group of anywhere from 5 to 20 kids on a given morning or evening, to and from school from just that immediate area. So it is very elementary school kid heavy right now. And with more coming up, just because we do have more kids that are even younger that will be feeding in over the next number of years. I just wanted to kind of advocate a little bit more for the sidewalks in that area, but then also specifically at Red Road and Idlewood. I see that you do have a number 10 listed there. Is that some sort of a crosswalk, or just making sure that that blind turn right there is addressed at all?
So that's actually a completed project that was filling in the gap on Idlewood Road that was missing a few years back. There was no sidewalk on that stretch of Idlewood Road.
So there is a sidewalk there, but then it just ends right there at Red. So
Right.
when kids are coming off of Idlewood and turning onto Red to go down Red Road into that part of the neighborhood, there's between where the sidewalk is and maybe the design of that particular sidewalk is more of the issue there, but there are trees and vegetation between the sidewalk and Idlewood Road that is extremely fast growing, and it creates this blind spot where cars turning cannot see anyone coming off that sidewalk. It's on a hill, so as you're coming down the sidewalk, you're just kind of plopped into the street right as those cars could be turning and not see you because of that vegetation. Neighbors in the area, we constantly have to keep calling in to address the overgrowth and get it cut down again. But it takes a while. And I know there's a lot of things going on for VDOT to kind of address and take care of. But it's almost as soon as it's cut down, we have to get back on the calls and make sure to call again in order to have it cut down by the time it's overgrown again. So I was just wondering if there's some sort of bigger project or bigger consideration to address kind of not just the bridge on Red Road, but then kind of all the peripherals that are related to that bridge, because I would definitely tie in better sidewalks and a realistic turn at that Red Road and Idlewood section if possible. And I think that's probably all I wanted to say about that particular area from a resident perspective.
Okay. Is there anything else? If not, I'm going to go ahead and move on.
No, I just wanted to just underscore that. I know some other people have mentioned it, but I'm going to just keep adding the votes too. So,
We appreciate it. Thank you.
thank you.
All right. Okay, with that being our last person who had their hand raised, what I'm going to do is there are comments that are posted in the chat, and we'll go ahead and take those. And this, just for everyone's sake, this meeting is being recorded and will be put up on the website, so you can go back and access the comments later. But we'll go ahead and pull them out too and make sure that they're all kind of consolidated in one spot so everyone can see them. But the one question I did want to that they get posted, we want to make sure we address is, what is the feasibility of having elevated pedestrian crossings, i.e. bridges, over the major thoroughfares, Route 7, possibly I-66, such as what was recently built on the W&OD Trail over Lee Highway towards the East Falls Church Metro?
Sure. That's a great question, and one we've actually been asked before as part of our work with the plan amendment. That is a tricky one. Of course, with this study, we're looking at a big area, right, and looking at a number of different recommendations, not just connecting across Route 7, but across Haycock Road, Shreve Road, Great Falls. Having a facility like that, and you referred to the crossing over Route 29 of the W&OD Trail that was built just last year, or maybe 2 years ago. That's an expensive project, and you can see if you've been on that bridge, it's a long bridge, and a lot of impacts would need to be made to properties if you were to do something like that across Route 7. So feasibility, that would definitely be a challenging one. I don't think that would be something that we would look at seriously considering. Again, we want to make sure that we're getting as many people as we can connected across these roadways and to the site as safely as possible. But the impacts that would be, have to go along with a project like that, and the cost, I think, would probably not work out very well.
Okay, thank you, Tim. And then I have another one as well. In addition to the county's analysis of 2019 pedestrian traffic, has there been any analysis of where the hundreds or thousands of new residents this development brings in are expected to want to walk, bike to most frequently?
Sure. That's a great question. And no, we haven't done an analysis of where people would want to walk from the development itself. But I think what this study can do is take that into consideration. And same with what Active Fairfax has done. That map that I had brought up to show the barriers to access. There's also a feature of that map is to include key destinations for people to visit. So, where you might want to get to, not just the metro station, not just the WNOD trail, but other destinations that you want to walk to. And then, what might be some of the barriers to accessing those destinations. So that'll play into this study too, not just connecting to the metro station itself, but some of the other assets around the area. So that is sort of holistically being considered as part of this project as we look at the 1 mile radius as we showed on the study area map surrounding the station.
All right, and then we have a raised hand. So 703-201-1272. I'm going to allow you to unmute yourself. And I'm hoping, yes, so if you are muted on your phone, if you can unmute yourself and see, there you go.
Hi, this is Mitch Bonanno, Chestnut Place resident near
Yes.
Route 7.
Yes, go ahead, Mitch.
So thanks for everything. Great meeting. Just want to make a couple of quick comments. So there is a bridge across Route 7 already at the WO&D Trail. Just happens to be in the city of Falls Church. And it works, great for bicycle traffic and all of that. Up Route 7 in Fairfax County, I think the goal really has to be traffic calming, improved cross sections, light timing, other things that slows that traffic from what is practically highway speeds, coming from Tyson's and off 66, heading towards Falls Church to allow pedestrian connections there. So I think you're right on with some of the other comments and recommendations about additional approved crosswalks and signalized intersections across Route 7. I just wanted to thank everyone for their time tonight. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bonanno. Okay, and then Tim, the other question that just came in, what part of the study analyzes what to do to prevent cut-through traffic into Hutchinson and Turner Avenue, avoiding the Haycock Great Falls light?
Okay, so one thing this study is not looking specifically at is cut-through traffic calming. Not to say that some of the features and some of the recommendations wouldn't address those in a roundabout way, widening sidewalks, narrowing travel lanes, those sorts of things would obviously calm traffic, and in some instances could even prevent cut-through traffic depending on what the recommendation might be. But we have a program within FCDOT called the Residential Traffic Administration Program that specifically looks at traffic calming and cut-through mitigations. So if you have a specific concern with either one of those, you can reach out to the RTAP program, and we can include that information along with these slides as well. But they look at this case-by-case basis and involve the community. They create a community task force, and do traffic counts if you're looking at traffic calming or cut through. And that's sort of a separate program that studies that.
All right, thank you, Tim. And I think that's it for the questions that we have in the chat window. We do understand that there are a number of comments that have been posted, and we will make sure that we pull those out and that they're considered as part of this evaluation. We're not doing that. We'll make sure that they make it into the advisory group understanding, as well as everything else, so that collectively we have a whole comments that we can start to put together and help the advisory group as they start to evaluate and try to help putting some priorities to the recommendations that again will come back out to the community for review and comments as well. With that, I don't see anything more. And I don't have anything else. So I want to say thank you to everybody for attending. We do have another session on Saturday. For anyone who was unable to make it and your neighbors want to attend, please feel free to attend that as well. With that, thank you very much for attending and have a good evening.
Thanks all.